At this point, we've been able to connect into the router locally or over the network. We've given some show commands to see what's going on with the router's configuration. Now let's do some basic configuration. We can do things like setting the host name on the router. So when we're sitting at the prompt, it doesn't just say router, it's some sort of intuitive host name. We also want to protect access to the router. We can do that by setting an enable password. We could also set a timeout so that if we walk away from our console or from our terminal session, if we've been gone maybe 5 minutes, for example, we could have our session timed out so somebody doesn't come behind us and do malicious things inside of the router. We can set a password on that line access to get into the console, to get into the VTY lines. But that password by default, it's in clear text if somebody gets a hold of our running configuration. So something else we want to do in this lesson is see how to encrypt those passwords. Not a real strong encryption, but at least where the casual observer is not going to be able to walk by and look over your shoulder and see what that password is. Then we're going to go from global configuration, where we're setting up things that impact the entire router, into interface configuration mode for a specific fast Ethernet interface. And we want to see how to assign an IP address, an IP version 4 address, as well as an IP version 6 address. And after we've taken a look at some of these basic configurations, we're going to sum things up at the end of this lesson with a demo. The demo is going to summarize a lot of the things we did in the lesson, how to get a router out of the box, set the host name, set the passwords, configure an interface, in addition to a few other commands that we don't formally have a video on, but I've got a few bonus commands I'm going to sprinkle in during that demo session. Let's get started though by seeing how to configure the router's host name. As we start to take a look at how to do some basic router configuration, let's start with a host name. Here I'm sitting at a router that has the not so imaginative host name of router. Maybe we want to be more descriptive. Maybe this is my HQ, this is my headquarters router. How can I change that? What I can do is go into global configuration mode. To do that, we say configure terminal or CONF space T, conf T. That's a shortcut way of getting into this terminal configuration mode. It's from here where I can start to enter commands. And I can enter global commands from this prompt. Notice that I'm at the config prompt. If I were in interface configuration mode, that config prompt would be config-IF because I would be configuring an interface. But here I'm doing a global configuration. I'm doing a configuration that applies to the router as a whole, not to a specific interface or a specific line or a specific controller. There's a variety of configuration modes into which we can go. But let's just globally set up the host name of this router. To do that, we're going to say host name, and we're going to give a name. I'm going to call this HQ. And there's something critical I want you to notice here. When we're making a change like this in our Cisco IOS, generally we do not have to reboot or restart anything in order to make it take effect. If I say host name and press enter, notice that the prompt is immediately going to change. It immediately changes from router to HQ. Let's see how to save that configuration. To exit out of this configuration mode, I can say end, or I could have said exit, to exit out one configuration level, and I was only one configuration level in. I was at the global configuration mode, so that would also have exited me out. But let's make a backup copy of our current configuration called our running configuration. What we want to do is take this running configuration and copy it to non-volatile RAM, to NVRAM. What makes non-volatile RAM so special is that it can survive a power cycle. We can turn the router's power off, turn the router's power back on, and what lives in NVRAM is going to be remembered. It's not going to go away just because we lose power. That's where we want to keep our configuration that we want the router to use when it boots up. That configuration that lives in NVRAM that we use when the router starts up is called the startup configuration. And what we can do, we can say copy running-config space startup-config, or many people do a copy run space star as a shortcut, but I'm copying from a source of what's in my RAM right now, my running configuration. I'm copying that current config into my startup config, into my NVRAM. It says, what's the destination file name? Well, we don't have to get creative here. We should be using a name of startup-config, so I'll just press enter. And now, when this router reboots, it's going to be using this startup config file that lives in non-volatile RAM.